Okay, let's dive into Philippians 1. Now, from yesterday's video where we heard about the planting of this church, we know that now some years later, roughly 11 years later, the Philippians have written to Paul in prison to ask him for some advice, and this is his response letter. He starts by saying, I'm so grateful for every one of you. I love you, I value you, and I pray for you. When I pray for you, I thank God for you. And in verses 3-5, he really expresses that gratitude that he has for his friends. But one of the things that's interesting to me is that in verse 5, he says, because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. One of the things that we get to understand about the church in Philippi is they are incredibly generous. And as I read about their support of him, their support of his ministry, and even their generosity to him in prison, I'm struck by the fact that this is a book all about joy, and it opens with not only gratitude, but stories about generosity. And as I think about that and reflect on the fact that that's how we're opening up this letter to friends, I just think about the fact that happy people are generous people and generous people are happy people. And it strikes me or challenges me that we should ask ourselves the same thing. When were we last generous? How can we be generous? How can we, out of the overflow of the joy that we have experienced in our lives, share with others who are around us? And it doesn't have to mean financial generosity, although it could. It can also be generosity with our time, generosity with our words. How can we be generous to the people around us and share out of the wealth and abundance that we have? I love that this joy letter starts with affirming and encouraging these generous people, and Paul saying, I'm so grateful for you. It's made a difference in my life. He goes on to share a bit of his heart for them, and in verse 9 it says, it is my prayer that your love may abound more and more with knowledge and all discernment, so that you may approve what is excellent, and so be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness. Paul's desire for his friends in Philippi is that they would be righteous, even in disagreement. And we know that there might be elements of their original letter to Paul that speaks about, help us settle this argument, help us figure out what is right, help us face the challenges that we're facing from outside our church and even the tensions that we're facing inside our church. But Paul's advice is this, and his prayer is this, that you grow in love, that you grow in knowledge, and you become pure, that's righteous on the inside, and blameless, that's righteous on the outside, able to live a blameless life, a life that is above reproach. That's his prayer for them. And in reading that, the question strikes me, how am I growing in love and how am I growing in knowledge? If you're taking part in this Bible study for these next couple of weeks, then you're investing in some of the knowledge that maybe you don't have yet about parts of the Bible. You're asking God to speak to you about some things that you might need to work on as you follow him. That's so fantastic, and your knowledge is going to grow as a response. If you compare that with growing your love as well, if you can do the two simultaneously, Paul shows us that there is a response, there's a resulting action in our lives, that we become those who walk in purity and blamelessness, and we are filled with the fruit of righteousness. So I love that scripture. I love what Paul is inviting them into there. Come and live a pure life, come and live a blameless life, even if you disagree, even if you face challenge. Joy comes from knowing that you are filled with the fruit of righteousness, that you are doing things right and for the right reason. And the last thing that I just wanted to draw out from this first half of the first chapter is Paul's heart. Paul's heart, even though he's in prison, even though he's facing his own challenges, is that the gospel would advance. And I'm challenged by that, because if I look over my personal prayer list, I imagine that it's more often filled with things that will benefit me than things that will benefit the kingdom. But Paul says, I would rather the gospel advance than I advance. So when I read that part of Philippians 1, I'm challenged to consider, where am I praying for the gospel to advance? Where am I praying for the things on God's heart to be elevated in the world, and not just the things that I want to see breakthrough in? So I want to challenge you with those few things. Can you be generous in this season? Is there joy in generosity that you're not yet experiencing? Can you pursue purity and blamelessness in this season by asking God to grow your love and your knowledge of him? And where are you praying for the gospel to advance? Not just for your own prayer list, for your own things that you want to see breakthrough in? What are the bigger picture prayers that God is asking you to pray in this season? I think those are great reflections just from the first part of Philippians 1. We're going to come back tomorrow and do the second part of that first chapter, but I would love to invite you to jump into the comments and share what your favourite part of that first chapter is. Any favourite verses, anything that stands out for you. Let's teach each other as we go through this study together. So jump in and share what stands out for you, and I'll see you tomorrow.